Hello and welcome to Mark Codex. My name is Mark, and today we continue working on our MERN Auth application. In today's video, we will connect our backend API to our frontend app by building the components that will be responsible for the sign in and signed up and the dashboard. So let's not waste any more time and start coding. Awesome. So we hooked up our routes, we hooked up our pages. Material UI, everything is working fine. That's awesome. Now the next step is basically just to hook up the API to our React app. Now a couple of things to add also is we're going to create some services, some utils functions to actually take control of or take care of our authentication. So let's kind of basically think about this before we start coding. I want to create a main context. This main context is going to use the create context in React. And what is that going to do is going to monitor the JWT token on while we're logging in and signing up and all of that. It will just keep seeing it. Basically, like let me briefly explain what is it going to do. It basically is going to look for, I'm going to try to save the token in the local storage. You could save it in a cookies, you could use a different package for that, but what I wanted to do for this app is save the token in a local storage. And when the token exists in there, that means the user has logged in because it's going to have all this information from like this, right? We're going to have like username and all that. From there, it will just monitor that. If that token got deleted, it will basically just remove that context from the whole app, and when that is removed, we're gonna do some stuff with that. So let's create this first, our main context, and then we're gonna go and create the services, and from there hook it up and see what's gonna happen. And of course we're gonna do after that we're gonna hook up the login. We're gonna have the form calling the API to grab all these information from there. Great. So let's create the main context, and we're gonna add a folder called contexts. I mean, we're gonna just have one. We could just call it context, but and RIFCE. We're gonna wait it forever to actually show up. There we go. I'm gonna change a couple of things in here. I want to call my function to call it as actually main context provider. Oh, come on. I'm gonna call it like so. And I wanted to create a variable called main context from the react.create context. Great. And I want to import, or just before the return, I wanted to create a local JWT. Let's capitalize that and make it grabbing it from local storage. Dot get item. And the item, I'm going to call it token. Because why not? And maybe like we could just like add an OR function just to say like if there is anything, if there is no token, just give it like a, I don't want it to be like a null value. I just wanted it to be like either an empty value or just simply whatever in that token. And we're going to use useState to grab the JWT and set JWT. And this is going to do useState. And of course, this will become our local JWT. Now we're gonna import useState as well. Cool, cool, cool. And in the return, we're gonna use main context, the variable that we just created. It has a method. When you create a context, it had a method inside of it called provider. And it will take a prop of a value, and this value will be two things. The first one is our JWT, and the second one is the set JWT. And that's how you set up your context. And then in there, I'm just going to pass the children. Cool. So now that's happening. Basically, I could just deconstruct children from here, or what I can do is just delete that, import props, and do props.children. Because this component that I just created, I'll wrap it around my app right here, this router. And that's the whole idea. Great. So now let's do that. Let's create our, let's add the wrapper. We're gonna import, actually let me put it at the top. And you're gonna ask me like, how did React work without adding import React in there? Well, I think with the new version of React, which is, I assume, is the 17 or above, then 16, they removed this from their app. So now you don't have to say like import React from React app anymore. That's why, like you see it, it's actually working. But we're just gonna keep it in there because I feel like OCD and this should be in there. So we're gonna import, oh, I forgot one thing. I need to export two things. So not default, I wanted to export the main context provider and also main context. That's the part that I forgot, sorry about that. And now we're gonna go back to our app and we're gonna import probably just the main context provider from context. Come on, I'm waiting, there we go. And then main context, like so. And then I'm gonna simply do this and wrap the whole app in this main context. Now we're not going to be able to see the context for now, but we will see it like later in action. Great. So this should actually take care of the rest. Let me just change this to, it's bothering me. I wanted to make it as an arrow function. Because why not? All right, I'll stop. Let's see. Great. So now we set up that. The next step is actually create our auth services. So let's create a folder. And this folder, we're going to call it services. And this will literally just take care of all the services we have in our app, which technically for this one is going to be the authentication. So first file I want to create is auth.service.js. And in here, I want to import Axios. And of course, Axios is going to complain and say like, hey, you don't have Axios. Oh, no, I do. Huh, never mind. So Axios is going to take care of all our fetching. Next, we want to create an API URL. Now, of course, you could create a .env file, which you could store your production URL in here, your API, production API in here. But for this case, we're just going to go with localhost 3001 API v1/user. Is that what we called it, right? Don't want to be wrong. Don't want to be wrong. All right, let's see. Let's go to routes and user routes. And yep, that's what we called it. Great. Finally, not wrong. Great. Now in here, we're going to create an auth service. And in the auth service, we're going to have 4 functions. We're going to have a sign up, which will take all the credentials that we have. And this will return axios.post. And in here, we're going to just add our API URL. And then we're going to just call sign up. Probably we just want to add the / in there. Great. And the other parameter is credentials. So this credentials is going to be our rec.body, which basically we have received from the router. Will be received from the router. Great. The other one is login. It's going to be kind of the same thing. So let me just copy that pretty quick. instead of sign up, we're going to make login in here. We're going to change it to login. Axios post. Great. We're going to create a logout function. And as simple as is just going to delete our local storage. Local storage dot remove item token. That's our sign up. That's our logout. Great. And lastly, I wanted to get current user. This is like for the dash purposes. So when a user is actually already logged in, we want to just to parse just JSON.parse local storage get item token. And of course, we do not want to forget export default Auth services or Auth service. Great. Probably not going to need this get current user, but let's think about this maybe later. For now, this is great. Let's go ahead and let me make sure I'm recording. Yeah, I'm recording. Great. All right. Next thing, we want to create the auth header for our API. And in order to do that, I'm going to just create a file called auth header.js. And in the auth header, it's going to be a default function. Export default auth header. And inside there, I'm just going to grab the token from the local storage, but I want to parse it because in the local storage is actually a string, and that's why I'm doing JSON.parse. It will just take care of moving that, converting that token from a string to an object. Token. Now, Kupnast. So we will check if token exists. What we will return is authorization as bearer plus token. So that's what I want to return. If not, just return an empty object. And why is this complaining? Because I have that. Great. And that's it. What is this gonna do is basically, if we go back and look at our Insomnia, remember we added the bearer token in here? That's exactly what is it doing. It's adding that to the header as a bearer token. And that's it. That's what we're doing. We're adding that to the API, but I'm putting it in a separate file. I can put it in the Auth services, but I would prefer to keep it in a different or separate file. So let's save all. Great. Last but not least, we're going to create a user service and an auth component. The auth component that I'm going to create is basically going to wrap any component that you don't want to show unless the user is logged in. I like to do it this way because it's easier to wrap those components, and this is going to be like a reusable component. Each time you want to create a new page, you could just grab this component, wrap it the other component that you want to actually show to the user if they are logged in, and that's why I'm creating it separately. So let's go ahead and create that in here as well in the services. So I'm going to call it auth component.js. And in here, we're going to do RIFC and wait for a year for this to load. Great. A couple of things I want to import. I want to import the main context, because that's what we're going to wait for. If it's going to basically, like, if there is any changes happening, it will just trigger in here. And this we're going to import it from context, main context. Cool. And I want to pass in props in here. And also what I want to add is that I want to add a functionality or a hook from React Router DOM called use history. I'll get to that in a second. Router DOM. Great. A couple of things I want to create in here. I wanted to grab the JWT from use context this time because I want to monitor that, right? Main context. I want it to be hooked up. And then the second thing is I will grab history, or just rename history from use history. Great. And I will use effect. I'll use effect to actually monitor the JWT. So if the JWT is not defined, or the JWT equal empty string. Now, some of you might say like this is enough, but in my experience, sometimes this actually like, if you just say this, sometimes like for an empty string, for some reason, it doesn't work. I don't know. It made me error before and I just learned my lesson. So each time I add those two, just out of like just being, pretty more cautious. And in here, we're going to return history. And in the history, there's a method called push, and I'm going to push to the home page. What is this going to do is simply it's going to check if there is no JWT, it will push the user back to the home page, which is going to be, in this case, the login. And I'll repeat, or I'll return an empty array per use effect, because if you don't, it will end up in an infinite loop. And I want to import a couple of things from here. I want to import use context because I'm grabbing that. And also I want to import use effect. Great. So now, of course, I want to grab props.children from here because, as I said, I'm going to wrap this component around the components that I don't want to show unless the user is logged in. Cool. Lastly, I'm just going to create maybe like a user function, get a user function. That's what I was like. That's why I was kind of hesitant about this from a local storage kind of point. I want to grab the dashboard from the API, right? So I want to get the information from the API, not the local storage. I'll keep this get current user probably like for cache purposes. It's easier to grab the information from here or faster instead of like hitting that API each time and might like, end up with like you have to build up a limiter or whatnot, which probably you should do. But anyways, I'm not going to make it too complicated. I'm just going to go with creating a file that is going to take care of our user service, which basically it will give us the information from the API user dash, which that's what I named, right? So users and user route, yes, user dash. Great. Let's go back to user services. Blob probably close to the right and close to the right. And in here, what I want to do, I want to import Axios from Axios. I want to import auth header from auth header. And I will create a function, or before that, let's create the API URL equal localhost 3001 API v1, and we're going to say const user service, and this will be an object that contains functions. And it's going to be get user board. or get user API, or dash, get user dash. Because why not? All right, let's return axios.get, and then we're gonna do API URL plus user /dash, and then in here the header will become our authorization, which will be an object of a header and auth header as a function. So we could return this bearer token. And lastly, we want to export default, not dash, not default user service. Okay, so now we set up all that. All is left is a couple of things. The first one, actually we're really close to finish. The first one is to wrap the dash component with auth header, or auth component, sorry. And of course we want to import we need to change this to route. All right, sorry about that. We're gonna import auth component from pages auth component. Cool. All right, so now we hooked up all that. Now, of course, there's nothing happening on the front end. There's probably gonna be a couple of things that is actually complaining about, which is not pages. It's from services. Yay. Local storage is not defined. I don't have to define it. Let's see, why is that? Is it in my context? Oh, local storage. This should compile. Great, it compiled. And it says React use effect has missing dependencies, history, or yeah. Yeah, I don't think like I'm gonna pass in either history or JWT. I had a trouble before, but maybe we could try it now. Not now, like when we hook up the login, the functionality to grab the information from the form and submission form, and see if that's actually gonna work or not. It's complaining because, sorry, I should have explained this and give more context. In here, use effect is complaining right here. It's telling me that either because I'm using two variables in here, it says like either you should actually pass in those like here. Like I should say history and JWT, but that will give me an infinite loop, and I don't want to do that. So we will try it. We will try it and see if it's actually working or not. Okay. So lastly, let's go back to the login. Okay, let's think about this. So in the login, I'm gonna hook up a function for the submit on this button. When the user submit, it will send this, it will use the function from the, not the user services, but the auth services. It will use the login method, and we should receive a bearer token in from there, and then store that in the local storage. So that's in the login. The signup will do the same thing. And lastly, the dash will grab the information from the token and just show it in here. And after that, we should have like a fully functional app. Great, pretty exciting. In the next video, we will finish our app completely by setting up the validation and the proper styling and display the information needed for our app to be fully functional. So make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when the next video is uploaded. Thanks you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay curious.